Let's talk about color. Every color can convey a specific mood. Of course, it may vary in different cultures. That's why when we're talking about mood, it's hard to be objective. But there are still fundamental principles of color combination. That's what we'll talk about today. The first type is monochromatic combination. That is, one color with different characteristics: light, dark, bright, dull, and so on. Monochrome looks simple and harmonious. With such a color combination, you shift the viewer's attention from the color to the composition, so that the shape and plot are in the foreground. This is an example of a frame with a monochromatic color setup from the movie called Blade Runner by Denis Villeneuve. In this particular case, a warm color palette is used. It's worth noting that the color should not necessarily be the same everywhere. It may vary in its hues. Here you can see an example in cold colors. The color blue. Pay attention to how the hues and shades create a silhouette. In this way, they separate the main object from the background. This example is in monochromatic blue color too. But if you look closer, you will see some warm colors in the background. But these are only tiny spots of them. These are the nuances of the composition. This is a very famous frame from a movie. It's also in a warm palette with one main color. Often, monochromatic color combinations are used for creating a silhouette in a composition, for example, like in this frame. Okay, it seems that everything is clear with monochromatic. It's quite a simple color scheme which is often used in cinematography and other types of art. The use of three or more colors that are situated close to one another on the color wheel. These colors are easy to combine because they are close on the color wheel. This type of color combination is elegant and uncluttered. Here you can see another frame from Blade Runner. It's a well-known frame in such colors. When you analyze the colors, you should always pay attention to the correlation of colors. It's an extremely important characteristic. For example, here, pay attention to the correlation between blue and pink, and purple colors. This frame could be an example of a monochromatic scheme, but if you look closer at the image, you will notice that the hues are too different here. They are closely situated on the color wheel. Here you see blue and light blue hues, green hues, and even a warm color light. Warm colors are used in this composition. Such a wide color range was used here. Here, you can calculate the proportions of the used colors. The proportions here remind us of the proportions of the golden ratio. The pink color takes 60%, while yellow takes 40%. Here is a really cool example from Fight Club directed by David Fincher. Willow green colors are based on the analogous color scheme. It means that it is built using colors that are closely situated on the color wheel. Everything's clear with the analogous color scheme. It's quite effective and easy to use. Let's move on to the next scheme. Two colors that are situated on the opposite sides of the color wheel are the complementary colors. It's the most common color scheme to be used for two colors. Probably you all know the color range of blue and orange. It's a combination of warm and cold colors. It's often perceived to be harmonious. It creates contrasting and lively image. Here you see that the major part of the composition is in cold colors. And you see a warm, contrasting spot that also covers the character's face. Such a color combination scheme is often used to accentuate specific parts. The complementary colors intensify each other. If one color is situated close to its opposite color, it will seem to be more intense and bright. Here you can see that in the prevailing cold colors, the face of the main character is accentuated. The skin is in warm colors. Thus, we can make a conclusion that this composition looks good both because of the color spots and the contrast between warm and cold colors. Here we can see a classic combination of warm and cold colors. Such a combination always looks nice. On this color wheel, they are completely opposite. Let's pay attention to the correlation between warm and cold colors. You see that the main character is accentuated with warm colors because the cold colors prevail in the surroundings. Here you can see a good example of using contrasting colors. The skin is in green colors at the crimson background, so a color silhouette is outlined. On the color wheel, these colors are complementary. Okay, so the conclusion is that the use of complementary or contrasting colors leads to good results. Also, this scheme can be used to accentuate the main object. Let's move on. Triadic scheme consists of colors that are at the vertices of an equilateral triangle. It's probably the most complex scheme, because using it, you can easily overload the composition with the colors if you select the proportions incorrectly. In cinematography, a clear-cut triadic scheme is used quite rarely, but if it is used, the most common colors for such a color scheme are red, green, and blue. For example, in this composition, you can separate a red zone, a green zone, and some blue accents. On the color wheel, the triangle will look like this. In this example, you can see this color scheme used in the main character's costume. Here, you can see the blue zones, red zones, and green zones. So you get a triangle. I hope that this basic information helps you select the colors for your works. Thank you for your attention. Here you can see the interface of Cinema 4D. It consists of 4 parts. The first part is the viewport. The second part is the object manager. The third one is the attribute manager. Each created object has its attributes that can be adjusted. The fourth part is the material manager, where we can manage the materials, create, change them, and so on. To cancel your action, press Ctrl-Z. And to redo the action, press Ctrl-Y. You move in the viewport by moving the camera, zooming in and zooming out the camera, and using the rotation of the camera. To undo the camera changes, press the shortcut Ctrl-Shift-Z and Ctrl-Shift-Y to revert. Also, you can change the default settings of the viewport camera. To do this, go to Cameras and select Show Camera Attributes. And in this window, you can change the parameters. To reset the settings to the default ones, just right-click the mouse on the arrow. It's especially useful to use objects as cameras. To use this feature, select the necessary object and go to the Cameras tab. Use Camera, selected object as camera. Now the camera is at the position of the selected object. Sometimes this trick really helps to set the lights for the scene. To revert, go back to the Cameras tab, select Default Camera. You can change the shading using the presets in the viewport. but I strongly recommend you to memorize the shortcuts to switch between presets quickly. Also, you can change the filters of your viewport and hide unnecessary objects. You can save your own preset so you can use it in the future. By clicking the middle mouse button, you open the other views of the viewport. Each of them can be configured. To enlarge one of the viewports, press the middle mouse button. If necessary, you can create an additional viewport and attach it next to the main one. The additional viewport will consist of 4 views as well. Again, each of them can be configured. Each project has its settings. To edit them, use the shortcut Ctrl-D. Here, you can change such project settings as FPS, the color of the default geometry display in the viewport, also, you can go deeper into more advanced viewport settings. Here, you can configure it to match your unique needs. If you have many objects, you can use different ways of selecting them. You can simply use the left mouse clicking and press Shift, or using the Object Manager, or using special selection tools. After you select the necessary objects, an axis appears in the middle of these objects' mass. It shows the point relative to which you will move the objects. Here, you should know 2 tricks that will make your work easier. The first thing is that you can select an object relative to which you will manipulate other objects. It's quite a convenient feature. The second thing is that you can manipulate relative to each object. To do this, you should select the checkbox Per Object Transform in the Tool Settings. An essential skill is the mastery of software shortcuts. I guarantee you that this skill will significantly speed up your work. By creating your own shortcuts or changing the existing ones to match your needs, you simplify your work. Let me show you a simple example of how you can do it. There are some geometry modes: points, edges, polygons. By default, they have no shortcuts, even though they are used quite often. So that's why I have decided to create keyboard shortcuts for them. I assigned them to the 1, 2, and 3 keys. To do this, you need to go to the Window tab, Customization, Command Manager. Here in the search bar, enter the name of the button. Next, in the shortcut field, enter the key you want to be used as a shortcut. Now we can quickly switch between these modes: points, edges, polygons. Also, there is a panel with icons. You can customize it and add your own buttons that are most commonly used in work. To do this, go to the Window tab, Customization, Customize Palette. Use the search bar to find the necessary tool you want to add to the top panel. Next, you just drag and drop it to the place you want it to be. To delete a tool, double-click with the left mouse button. In the newer versions of Cinema 4D, node operators were added. You can add them to the panel as well. To add a node operator to the panel, go to Asset Browser, and in the search bar, find the node operator you need. Next, click Edit, Edit Palettes, and drag it to the necessary place. To save the changes you made to the interface, go to Window, Customization, Save as Startup Layout. Go to Window again, Customization, Save as Default Scene. Okay, all of the changes in the project settings, tool positions, and shortcuts are saved. Now, when you open Cinema 4D, your saved scene will open. Before starting work, I have found some images which I will use as references. A reference is any image of the object we can refer to and base on any of its features. The longer and more thoroughly you select the references at this stage, the better will be the visual constituent of your work. You shouldn't just copy the references, you should refer to them. Piece by piece, borrow the elements you need and merge all that into an integral unity. These may be the texture, color, light, shape, composition, and so on. So any image constituent can be used for guidance or reference. In our case, I have selected the references for the color, mood, and texture. I have decided that my work will be in blue shades. I have recalled that the guys from the Ordinary Folk Studio have really cool works where they use a similar color palette. I have saved the frames from their works and I will use them as a reference for creating the colors. Here are the works from Microsoft Design. They are undoubtedly famous for using a wide variety of textures and materials: plastic, textile, stone, glass, and so on. Here I have collected really cool frames we'll use as references when creating the shaders. For example, in these frames, you can see how cool different flaws and holes in the geometry can look. Here's another cool example of combining scruffiness, glossy, and matte surfaces. Here I liked the application of surface scatter, and I also liked how the dull material looks. It looks pretty minimalistic. I want to apply this principle to the character's head. That's basically all I wanted to tell you about references. So, let's start working. You can call Redshift Light using the commander. Alternatively, you can add it to the top pane using Customize Palettes. To do this, in the search bar, enter RS Light. Drag and drop it into the necessary zone. Now we can quickly call RS Light. To delete this icon, go to Customize, Palettes, and double-click on the icon. RS Light is a universal redshift light. By default, its type is set to point. In the Type drop-down list, you can select the source type. Okay. There is an alternative way to add redshift light to the scene. You can use the Redshift tab and go to Lights. In this list, you can see all available light types of redshift render. Each of them is useful in specific situations. Let's look into each of them in detail. Infinite light is the light source that is infinitely far away from the scene. The directed light has no location, only one direction vector. All of the light rays are parallel and they are not dispersed. For navigation, you can use this pointer that shows the direction of the light. The lights of this type are parallel. It means that it gives light only to one side, because it's infinitely far away. Sometimes this light source can be useful for lighting interiors. The combination of several such light sources with different shades can lead to really good results. The most commonly used settings of infinite light are the shadows settings. To change them, go to the Details tab. Here we can regulate the softness of the shadows. You can manually enter any value here. Also, you can regulate the transparency of the shadows. To reset the shadows settings, click with the right mouse button on the arrow. In the Object tab, you can regulate the intensity and exposure of light for all light sources. You can also change the color of the light source and its temperature. Point light simulates a bare bulb light, which emits light in all directions, from an infinitesimally small point in space. Unlike infinite light, the light direction vectors of the point go in all directions. Using Redshift, you can also fake and change the shadow's softness irrespectively of the distance to the object. For example, in real life, such a small light source cannot create such soft shadows if it's close to the object, but here you can control this parameter to achieve your artistic goals. Also, you can change the color of the light and upload textures. By experimenting with the textures, you can achieve really good results. Here, you can see how the texture is projected on objects. It looks awesome. You can rotate the texture by rotating the light source and the Rotate tool. By increasing the intensity of the light, you can use it as the main light in the scene. But most often, point light is useful for creating abstract works or simulations of light bulbs in interiors or devices. It's a spotlight that emits light in a cone shape. Spotlight is most commonly used in combination with the target and null setups. To add it, in Attribute Manager, click the drop-down arrow and select Add Target and Null. Set the target to the head. In the World Coordinates mode, I changed the position of the light source. Redshift Spotlight simulates spotlight in real life. But you can change it significantly. You can change the light's intensity. Let's move on to the settings of spotlight shape. To do this, scroll down. For a spotlight, we can change the cone's angle, that is, its width, and control the fall-off of the cone and its softness. It's worth noting that in fall-off curve, you can enter any value to control its softness without any limitations. In Spotlight, you can control the shadows. You can control the shadow's softness as well as its transparency. This concerns all other Redshift lights. Also, you can set any color to the spot. By changing the color and adding different textures, you can achieve really interesting results. Like with point light. Spotlight is often used in combination with RS Environment, which enables you to create dimensional light dispersion and the effect of an all-encompassing fog in the scene. Let's decrease the value of the scattering parameter, which regulates the intensity of the fog. Spotlight is a very popular light source. I often use it in my works when I want to create a dramatic effect, or add some concert mood. IES stands for Illuminating Engineering Society. The IES data format describes the distribution of light from a point source. Most major manufacturers of lights provide IES profiles which can be downloaded for free. In this light type, you need to upload the profiles which will define the intensity and flow of light. To illustrate it, let's increase the size of the light source. To do this, go to the Coordinates tab and change the value in scale. Now you can see better how your IES profile looks. Now, this is the light that is directed upwards. Let's rotate it and increase its intensity. You can notice that the light is distributed on the floor unevenly. To ensure even better visibility, let's create a plane. In this way, you will see better the pattern produced by the IES light. It reminds us of the decorative lamps in the interior. That's why IES lights are often used in interior lighting. Using different IES profiles, you can achieve interesting results. It can be used in all kinds of situations, such as the imitation of lamps in interiors, or, for example, simulation of caustic, and so on. Your imagination is your only limitation. Each IES profile has its individual pattern. Also, IES lights combine quite well with RS environments. In this case, you can experiment and obtain really awesome results. Area light is light which has a real physical size and shape. Area light is the most popular light source because it simulates a real-life light source. It means that it takes into account the shape and size. Also, this light source features numerous settings and functions using which you can achieve exactly the result you need. In this light type, you cannot change the softness of the shadows because the softness of the shadows now depends on the size and distance like in real life. But there is still the possibility to control the transparency of the shadows. Let's use an example to make the shadow harsher. To do this, reduce the size of the light source. When you make the light source smaller, you see that its intensity decreases because it's correct from the point of view of physics. You can compensate such a decrease by increasing the exposure in the light settings. Yes. Now you see that the shadow has become slightly harsher than it used to be. You can change the intensity, color, and temperature of the light. A quite useful feature is the possibility to control the direction of the rectangle or disk light sources. The smaller is the value of spread, the more the light is concentrated in the direction of the light normal. If you reduce the value of spread, the light source will become brighter because the flow of light is concentrated in one direction. You can compensate it by reducing the value of exposure or intensity. You must remember that the value 1 for spread is by default a physically correct behavior of light, while the 0 value turns it into a spotlight. You can make the light source visible. Let's move the light source in a way that it faces the camera. Now we can see it in the render. You can make the light source bidirectional. And also, you can normalize the intensity of light so that when the light source changes, the light intensity stays the same. Let's set the light intensity and now try to change the size of the light source. You see that the intensity stays the same. Also, you can see how the shadow changes depending on the size of the light source. There is a possibility to change its shape. You can select a rectangle or a disk. Of course, you can change the size of the shape and its direction by changing the value of spread. But you can only change the value of spread for the rectangle and disk. Dimensional shapes have no such feature. You can select a sphere. This shape is quite good for soft lighting, but if necessary, you can create a simulation of point light. Also, you can select a cylinder. Another cool function is that you can use any geometry as a source of light. To do this, you need to add the necessary object in the mesh field. For example, let's create a torus object and drag it to the necessary area. Now select the object in the Object Manager and drag and drop it in the mesh field in the light settings. Now the object has become the light source. You can change it, move it, and so on. Also, using area light, you can create abstract results. For this purpose, let's upload any texture. You can change the spread parameter to concentrate the texture pattern. Let's disable the visibility of light and create the RS environment. You get such a cool result. Let's reduce the value of scattering to make the fog less dense. It looks quite impressive. In this way, you can experiment and create different compositions. Simulates light emitting from a large sphere that always surrounds the entire scene. You can think of this as a sky that illuminates your objects with mapped image, for example. In Dome Light, you can upload special textures of HDRI cards, which can simulate the environment. I recommend you use high-quality HDRI cards with a wide range. In this way, the exposure will be better. Using the Rotate tool, you can rotate the dome light and change the lighting in this way. Also, you can do it using the coordinates. I prefer to combine these two methods. You can change the hue parameter to change the color of your HDRI card. Also, if necessary, you can control the intensity of texture. You can disable the visibility of the dome light. You can do it in the Environment tab, the Background checkbox. When you disable the visibility of the texture, you do not disable its effect. You can change the background with another image and preserve the lighting from the HDRI card. Also, you can configure the backplate, its exposure, hue, saturation, and gamma. You cannot regulate the shadow softness because it depends on the HDRI card. To be more precise, it depends on the area of its bright zones. But we still have the possibility to regulate transparency. A special type of light source that can optimize the calculation of global illumination, often used in window frames for interior renderings to optimize the rendering of indirect light coming through the windows. Here is such a scene. It's an imitation of a closed room with a window. Portal light is very often used to light the interiors. The trick of portal light is that it selects the color of light from dome light from the HDRI card. Let's create dome light and upload an HDRI card into it. You see that the light source can't light the closed room through such a hole. Let's add portal light and position it at the place where the window should be, from where the light should come to the scene. So far, you can't notice any effect from adding portal light. Let's increase its intensity. Now you see that now there is more light in our environment. Let's try to rotate dome light. Note that portal light and dome light function together. It means that portal light depends on the angle of dome light. For example, in our scene, dome light is positioned at such an angle when it's hard for light to get into the closed space through the window. You can simply increase the intensity of portal light and there will be more light in the room. Let's have a look at the difference in the room with portal light and without it. It simplifies our work with closed spaces. To get such a result using only dome light, you would need to increase its exposure a lot, and it would negatively impact the scene optimization and background. The HDRI card would become very bright. What's more is that you can change the spread parameter and make the light more directed. Also, we can change other parameters of the light source. Since portal light depends on dome light, any change of HDRI textures of dome light will impact portal light. For example, here I changed the saturation of dome light and the light coming from portal light changes as well. Or for example, the hue parameter. Also, you can change the transparency of the shadows. Similar to the infinite light type, but specially designed to mimic sunlight, this includes a color change depending on the angle of incidence of this light source. You see that when you change its position, the color changes. You can regulate the intensity like you can for all other light sources. You can regulate the size of the sun. It will affect the shadows. The bigger the sun, the softer the shadows. Here you can set either the red or blue color. Often, really small values are used. For example, 0.1. Also, you can change the intensity of the color. I rarely use only sunlight in my work. There is a really good preset in Redshift. It consists of RS Sky and RS Sun. Let's create it. You can find it in the Object tab. It's a similar light, but besides the sun, there is also the sky with its settings. Select RS Sky in the Object Manager. Here there are two tabs, Sky and Sun. Here we can control the parameters of the sky and the sun. In the Sky tab, you can regulate the intensity of the sky, but it can be treated as overall light regulation. In the Atmosphere tab, you can find some other parameters. For example, turbidity. It's the clarity of the air. By default, it's set to 2 for a clear sky. If you increase this value, the sky becomes orange and the intensity of light reduces. The ozone parameter indicates the amount of ozone in the atmosphere. By default, it's set to 0.35. This value is usually used for the Earth's atmosphere. If you reduce this value, there will be more orange color in the sunlight. If you increase the value, the light will become bluer. Horizon height defines the position of the horizon. Horizon blur is used for blurring the horizon line. In this lesson, I have provided you only with the most basic knowledge about light sources. But even with this knowledge, you can start creating your first works without any hesitation. To conclude this lesson, I can say that Redshift features a wide range of light types with which you can experiment and find your own creative solutions for your works. Okay, let's create the basic lights for our scene. We have such a 3D scene. I have subdivided it to 3 basic blocks. They are the floor, the character, and the camera. To ensure higher work convenience, create a separate layer for each block. Go to the Layers tab and double-click on the left mouse button to add a layer. By double-clicking on the layer text with the left mouse button, you can rename it. I set the same name as those of the nulls. Using the middle mouse button, select the block's hierarchy and drag it to the necessary layer. By double-clicking with the left mouse button on the color icon, you can adjust the color of the layer. Now you can quickly manage the structure of the scene. You can enable the solo mode for a layer. You can hide layers or disable layers visibility in Render. Also, you can hide layers in the Object Manager. You can lock all the objects belonging to this layer. You can disable the animation of the layer's objects. You can disable all the generators of the layer. You can also disable all deformers. You can disable the expressions and XREFs. To continue working, let's create a RS render view window and place it next to the main viewport. Okay, the layout for our 3D scene is ready. Let's move on to basic setting of the lights. To do this, go to the Redshift tab and create Dome Light. Usually, I start my work by setting Dome Light. I use it as a basis for further lights creation. Let's add an HDRI card. It's recommended to use high-quality HDRIs with a wide range to ensure a better exposure. To manipulate the dome light, you can use the Rotate tool in a viewport. Alternatively, you can use the Transform in the Coordinates pane. I prefer to combine these methods. My aim is to find the angle which will fill in the space with light unnoticeably, because the places that are to be accentuated will be highlighted with ordinary area lights. Okay, I have found the final angle. Now let's create one more light source, Area Light. I renamed this light source to Key Lights by double-clicking it because I will use this light to highlight key area in the scene. It's the character's head. Let's change the size of the light source. You can do it by modifying the parameters size Z and size Y. To do this, go to the Attribute Manager of the light and find these parameters in the Object tab. For my convenience, I switch to the second viewport window, where the camera view is not used. To ensure that it's convenient to set the lights, let's create target null for the light. You can do it by applying a special function in the Redshift area light in the Attribute Manager. To do this, click on the down arrow, select Add Target Tag and Null. Now the light has a null to which it will be constantly rotated. You can move this null to any place you want to highlight. Now you can easily select the light source and move it, and still be sure that it will always light the point you have selected. To ensure my convenience, I enable the World Coordinate System. You can also do it using the W shortcut. Since the face is situated in the right side, it would be reasonable to direct the key light from the right side. I want to create an imitation of a sunbeam. That's why I position the light source somewhere in the upper part of the composition. By default, Redshift utilizes physically correct calculations for creating the light flow. Since the light source is placed at such a distance from the object and is of this size, the light coming from that source will be quite scattered. But there is a very useful feature in Redshift. It's called Spread. Using it, we can control the dissemination of the light. I mean that we can make it more intense. Let's try to change this parameter. To do this, in the Attribute Manager of the light, find this parameter and change its value. Due to the increase of light concentration, it becomes more intense. That's why we need to reduce its intensity to avoid harsh overlighting. Okay, it's better. Now the light reminds us of a sunbeam coming through an opening. Such more concentrated light helps to highlight the necessary zone. That's why I use the spread parameter quite often in my work. Let's create one more light. I want to position it at the top to ensure a better lighting of the object. In our case, to position it at the top is the optimal option. In real life, photo studios, or when shooting movies, ads, top light is quite common in the lighting setup. For example, for portraits or taking photos of products and so on. Let's have a look at our three main light sources. Okay, we have set up the basic light. Having it configured, we can move on to the shading stage. Note that we have created the basic lights for the default material. It means that all objects absorb and reflect the light in the same way. You must not forget about it, because in the future, you will need to slightly change the lights and move the light sources. It's because other materials can interact with the light a bit differently. Different materials absorb and reflect light in different ways.